Today we're going to be talking about Proverbs 25. It starts off telling us that King Hezekiah was the king of Judah 250 years after Solomon lived, had his advisors get together and come up with some more of Solomon's Proverbs. And so it starts off with advice to kings and who we would call the leaders of today. And then it goes to neighborly advice, how we should treat our neighbors, and it talks about holding grudges and making judgments, making quick judgments, because God's the only one that sees the whole picture, and we just see what little part of it that God has allowed us to see. And it's about much more than what we see. Then it goes into faithful words, saying things that are helpful and not harmful. And it's not about whether we have laryngitis and we can't talk, or how eloquent our words are, or our grammar. It's about what's in our heart. And it's often about saying the right words at the right time, or perhaps saying no words at all. And then it goes into the dangers of too much, of overindulgence, and self-discipline and self-control. And it specifies that that it doesn't do us or anybody any good if we grumble or complain about what life gives to us on a daily basis. And again, it talks about holding grudges and not being able or not being willing to forgive. And that so many of our physiological problems, as well as emotional and mental problems, have to do with not being willing to forgive. That's our life is based on our willingness to forgive people who don't even know that they wronged us in the first place, and just having a heart peace. Let me tell a story. Okay. There were two men in the hospital, and they were both very seriously ill. They shared a room. There was one man who had a bed by the window, and the other man was not able to sit up at all. But the man by the window was able to sit up for an hour a day to allow his lungs to drain the fluid off of his lungs. And so the men got pretty close to each other because they were there all day. And once a day for an hour, the man would sit up and look out the window and tell the other man about everything he saw outside. And there was this beautiful lake, and the swans were swimming on the lake, and the children were playing by the lake, and they talked about their kids and the things that they did for vacation. And there was a city skyline off in the distance, and they talked about the buildings where they had worked. And he was telling them he saw an airplane flying by, and he described the airplane, and they talked about places they had visited with their families. And one day he looked out, and there was this beautiful gazebo, and this couple was getting married, and they talked about their weddings, and he described how the people were dancing with each other and how the children were playing. He described how everyone was dressed, and they couldn't hear the band, but the man who was laying down could picture it in his mind, and he just thought about all the joy that those descriptions brought to his life, even though he wasn't able to see. And one day there was a circus that came through town, and he told him how the elephants were walking together with their tails together, and all the clowns, and he just described the beauty that was out there. And this man lived for the joy of hearing all of these things for an hour a day. And then he got this thought of, why should he get to see all this and I don't get to see anything? And he was ashamed of himself when he first thought that. He was just ashamed. But he couldn't push that out of his mind, and he just started getting very resentful toward the man. How can he get to see this and I get to see nothing? And he couldn't shake that thought. And so he became so bitter at this man that he just laid there, and his stomach was in knots. And he couldn't stand the thought. He couldn't sleep at night. And one night, about 1 o'clock in the morning, the man who was able to look out the window started gurgling when he was breathing. He was gasping for his breath, and he reached over. He was groping for the call button to call the nurse, and the man just watched him. And he listened to him, and he watched him struggle for about 5 minutes, and then it stopped. And in the morning, the nurse came in to give him their bath, and she found his lifeless body in the bed. So after they had taken him out and all the commotion from his death had kind of died down, he asked the nurse if he could go have the bed by the window. And she said, sure. And he thought, finally, I get to see for myself. Finally, I get what I want. So after the nurse left and he was comfortable, took all of his strength and he propped his head up on his elbow, and he couldn't wait to turn and look out that window. And when he turned, what he saw was a bare, blank wall. We don't know what's in somebody else's world. We don't know. We don't know outside of our own picture. And that story just came to my mind when I read this, because it envelops pretty much Proverbs 25 to me.